I want to learn how to build in all the different styles you can build in Minecraft, so I came up with the very original idea of spinning a wheel with a bunch of different themes on it, and whatever it lands on, I have exactly 24 hours to build as much as I possibly can in creative mode. It ended up landing on Steampunk, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a subgenre of sci-fi where everything runs on steam power instead of electricity. The buildings have a bunch of gears, pipes, and old-looking machinery that make the buildings look really industrial and mechanical. I'm not some kind of steampunk expert, so I hope I explained that good enough. So after pinning a bunch of reference images on Pinterest, I hopped in a super flat world and got to work. For the first few hours, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was going off of some ideas from a few different photos. I started with basic shapes and laid out some outlines for future pipes with orange wool, and then some random generators or gadgets or something with blue wool. I'm building everything else out of one brown block so that I could color it all later and make it actually look good. It might not be the most efficient thing ever, but it's definitely a lot more convenient for me. So far, it definitely wasn't the best, so I was gonna have to change it all later on, but I moved on to different sections of the build and pretty much just went off of any idea that popped into my head. I started to build in more and more complex and intricate little pipes and vents and just random subsections that make no sense whatsoever. I should probably mention that I didn't do all 24 hours in one sitting. In fact, I only did about 30 minutes to an hour at a time, which is a little misleading, but it's because, number one, I don't think I've ever mentioned this in a video before, but my health kind of sucks, so it's hard to spend a lot of time at the PC, which is why I upload like once a month. Smash like for health issues. And number two, this is creatively and mentally kind of exhausting. I did a couple of building competitions in the past, and some of the people in there would stay on all day just building. I genuinely don't understand how anyone does that kind of stuff without getting incredibly burnt out. But basically every time the video cuts to a new one, that's usually an entirely new building session. But anyway, building in this style is definitely an interesting experience because it feels like I have to constantly force out anything I can think of just to add more to the build. So once I get even the slightest idea of a new shape to try or a new formation of an old idea, I kind of just go with it and it almost always works, which is fine, but to me it felt like I was just kind of making abstract art with how it makes literally zero sense, but it looks kind of interesting. Definitely not my favorite style, but I am building at a pretty large scale, so it did feel a bit tedious at times, and I'm also at a time limit, so that doesn't help, but I was ready to work on the side and the back of the build where I slowly was figuring out how I could add more and more intricate details to it. Basically, my strategy was to add a lot of depth by carving shapes into the walls, adding ledges, adding pipes, pretty much anything I could think of that makes the walls look a little less flat, because a lot of the reference images I found have the buildings look really noisy and cluttered with random details. But if I did decide to leave the wall pretty flat, I could definitely make it look detailed in the coloring phase. A lot of this build, and honestly this entire video idea, was inspired by Shovel241. He is one of the best builders of all time and he makes much better videos than I do, so go check him out after this one. But he's made some ridiculously cool builds that I used for some ideas for this build, so I thought I'd give him a little shout out. So I kept on working on the back, packing in as much detail as I could, which I realized I actually managed to put more detail into the back of this thing than I did in the front, so I think that might affect how many views this video gets when they see my thumbnail on the homepage. Nah, I'm just kidding. I went back to the front and fixed a lot of the boring aspects I had before because I didn't really know what I was doing at the start, so I added a lot more of the cluttered elements at the front part, and then I decided the tower on the left side needed a rework and added the same type of treatment. I'm definitely a lot more happy with what I came up with. I also wanted to add some actual steam coming out of some of the vents and pipes, which I did out of glass and glass panes. It's not the best looking smoke, but it gets the job done. After that, I was ready to start the coloring phase, so I set up a very rough block palette to work with. Some of these blocks I never used at all, especially the harder ones to get in survival, because I might build this in my survival world in the future, but I just placed them down as an option. I went ahead and changed out all the brown blocks for pink wool, so it's easier to differentiate from the colors, and I started painting the build using a mod called Axiom, which allows me to replace the blocks really easily. And mostly by hand, I began texturing the walls with a ton of different blocks. At first, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted it to look like, but I decided to make everything look really rusty and just old looking, and I wanted lighting to be important in the entire build. What I mean by that is I want shadows in spots where the sun isn't hitting it, so I made it so the lighting from the sun is coming from the top right, which meant the shadows would show up below and to the left of overhangs and stuff like that. So I used darker blocks to look like shading. I also decided I didn't really like the green copper color and instead went for just a simple brown, orange, gray, and black palette, which I think works better for this, but I have seen some other builders like Junipi, Snarple, and Aura make some really colorful designs. But yeah, coloring was definitely the most fun part of this build because it let me turn this thing from looking like a brown mess into a really interesting looking metal tower with a lot more character. It really made the whole thing come together, and I just think figuring out the texturing and gradients is a really fun challenge. I tried to make sure there was a good mix between walls with brown colors and walls with like gray and black because I didn't want everything to look like they blend together. So that was one of my main concerns since I don't really have much experience with color. I realized that I kind of accidentally made it so there were darker blocks at the bottom of the build and then lighter grays at the top of the build, which I think actually worked out pretty decently. It might help guide your eye to look at it all in order or something like that. I don't even know. I definitely could have put more work into building a central focus for the entire building instead of just adding a lot of clutter throughout the whole thing. So that's probably my biggest critique for myself, but let me know in the comments what you think because I'm not really sure how well I did with that. I moved on to coloring the bridge as well as the tower, and I went with this really simple design with dark gray and only the metal brown on the important parts at the top. I think that actually helped with showing what's important on the left side of the entire build. When I built it in the first place, it was probably my least favorite thing I made, but it slowly grew on me and I actually really like it now. I'm not sure how steampunky it is though. Next, I worked on this pipe that's been sticking out, which makes literally 0 sense by the way. It leads into the side of the building where the hole in the middle is, so I actually can't defend the logistics of this thing, but hey, it looks cool. And if you don't think about it too much, I think it looks pretty good. It was also pretty tricky to get the texturing right, and I still think the way I made the lighting was pretty questionable. After that, I fixed up the crane that's been sitting at the top. At first, I made it all deep slate, but I then changed it all to be tough blocks, holding like a wood pallet. I also added the one and only gear in the entire build. I tried to add more into the regular build, but they just didn't really fit anywhere. So anyway, by hour 20, I finally got to the back side of this thing, and I was making some crazy progress. I did it all in like 3 sessions, and I really liked how it turned out. I added these red cylinder container things that I like to think hold some kind of liquid that might be used for fuel or something. This side also has a bunch of vents and grates, so I'm not really sure if I went too overboard with that, but I was kind of running out of ideas. I think it looks good enough though, and I was pretty much too lazy to fix it anyway. I also really don't know how I feel about the mess of copper pipes at the bottom left. You can tell what I was going for, but I don't know if it works as well as I wanted it to. But yeah, with a whopping 2 hours remaining, I finished the whole build. I don't even know what to call this thing or what this is, but I'd say I'm pretty proud of it. By the way, I just set up a Patreon, so if you want to download this build along with every other build I've made, go check it out. It's $5 a month and it gives you full access to all the schematics and world downloads. So yeah, that's about it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video. It really helps support my channel, and subscribe for more building videos like this one. Okay, goodbye.